Hello, everyone. My name is Vlad Glăveanu. I'm professor of psychology at Dublin City University. And it is my pleasure to give a very short talk on one of the topics that fascinates me, which is the possible. As a creativity researcher who has been studying creativity for about 15 years now, from a sociocultural perspective, as a type of social material cultural process and not only psychological, I came to realize over time that at the heart of my passion for creativity is the notion of possibility, the way in which creativity expands what is possible for our thinking, for our action, and for our way of being in the world. So what is the possible? Well, a very simple starting point would be to say that we as human beings live what I like to call amphibious lives, that we live at the same time in the here and now of immediate experience, but that we're also able to expand our horizon, to enrich this experience with something that is not present, not immediately present. The past, we can travel into the past. We have these time machines that are our minds that can go back to remember the past. We can travel to the future. We can anticipate the future. We can anticipate problems. We can anticipate joys and sorrows, and we can think of alternatives. We can look at what is and consider it in a different way, as it could be. And all the while, we engage in these processes that are very well known to creativity researchers as well, thinking as if, and what if, and if only. So our engagement with possibility is closely connected to creativity. In many ways, when we create, we necessarily have to, both be connected to what is present, what is in the here and now, and at the same time, try to go beyond it. But, and this is an important point, the possible is also a wider umbrella. And if you look only here at these processes that substantiate our engagement with the possible, we recognize that besides creativity, we have a lot of imagination. We might have serendipity and wonder and anticipation and counterfactual thought, and even engagement with utopias, dystopias, and ways of imagining the impossible. So the possible as a generous field, very wide concept, very wide field, I think should be of great interest for creativity researchers. And I think there is a lot that can be learned from literatures that are close to creativity, but that also expand what we know from our type of research. So I'm going to spend this short video basically proposing to you a short, brief model, a theoretical model, theory development being one of my passions. And this is called the perspectival theory. And it actually started with me thinking about the creative process. So it is a perspectival theory of creativity. I formalized in some recent papers on sociocultural theories. But it is also, at the same time, the way I think about engagement with the possible. And this is something that I wrote about in my book, The Possible, a Sociocultural Theory. So there is a big connection there. But just to make the points, let's imagine an object, something, anything. It could be an idea, it could be a material object, it could be a value, it could be an abstract notion like love or democracy, or it could be ourselves. We can take ourselves as the object, if you want, of our creative engagement. But for simplicity, let's just say it's an umbrella, okay? So what's interesting is that at all times, we have these perspectives that we use to understand anything, any object in the world, ourselves, the world itself, and so on. So for the umbrella, the dominant perspective, this conventional way of thinking about the umbrella, that comes from us being positioned in the world in a specific way, being part of a specific culture, and being used to umbrellas, being used in a specific way, is umbrellas can shelter you from the rain. And I say this because I come from Western, European and living in Western Europe recently, but here umbrellas are used mostly for the rain. But in other cultural spaces like Southeast Asia, for instance, they're very often used to shelter from the sun. In any case, what's interesting about the spark of creativity and the spark of possibility is whenever we have this second perspective that comes and clashes and contradicts and questions what we think we know about an object like the umbrella. So imagine you go to a dinner party and you see this, this artifact, which is a lamp, but it's also an umbrella, right? What's interesting here is that the umbrella is used very differently. Instead of focusing on the outer surface that is protecting from the rain, we're focusing on what's beneath, which is the bit of a cupola created by the umbrella that spreads light, right? It's a very different affordance. So what happens in those moments when either deliberately or accidentally we come across a new way of engaging, a new perspective on the thing we're working on or focusing on, is that according to this perspectival model, we could start, we don't often do it, but we could start thinking, what else? What else is there? What else can an umbrella be? So this is what I call here with a dotted line, you know, the perspective 3, the third way. So a lot of ideas could come to mind here. These are not photos I've taken, sadly. I'm not that creative, but you can use umbrellas as a flower pot. You can use them as a skirt to shelter yourself from the rain, you know, very useful in places like Ireland. Or you can deconstruct, if you are more technical, deconstruct the umbrella and have a newspaper magazine stand of sorts. So this is fascinating to me because it speaks again to a very human capacity, and this is a way I would summarize this model, if you want. You notice the umbrella became this little dot at the basis of it, and then you have these different perspectives coming in. The very thickened one, perspective 1, is usually the dominant, conventional, hegemonic perspective for reasons related to our living in society, where we have different groups and communities and power relations, and the fact that our reality is represented for us in very specific ways, you know, through social reproduction of knowledge, practices, and ideas. We often have this first entry point into our world that is dominant. We think we know what things are. We think we know what they're for. But, and this is where the story of the possible emerges, and as I said, in many ways of the creative act, you often get this novelty that you either look for or discover accidentally, and that novelty helps you question, what else is possible? What else is there? What else could I do with this? The meta position, which is at the top of this now triangle of sorts or pyramid of sorts, is this idea that when we explore possibility, we often place ourselves in this meta position from which multiple ways of looking at reality become possible. So instead of looking at the world and ourselves through a very singular, unitary perspective, we are opening ourselves up to what could be, to multiple interpretations, to multiple futures. And this, in short, is the theory of the possible. And I'm hoping that with this very short presentation, I managed to make you curious. I managed to perhaps kind of discover those resonances in terms of how you might be thinking already about creativity, and also to give a sense of where I would hope that the field of creativity studies will move towards, you know, in the next 10, 20, 30 years and so on, which is trying to help us develop meaningful theories, and with them, you know, ways of applying theory and meaningful practices that help people understand what is possible in their lives, how they exist as possible selves, and give them the tools to change the world for the better, hopefully for the better, right? by exploring those possibilities that make life worth living and make society a better place for everyone. I think we live in such troubled times that are so, facing us constantly with this terrible perspective of the impossible, the pandemic that we've been through and we're kind of continuing through, the war we see in Europe and in many other parts of the world that is completely shaking our sense of the world and of who we are. These are moments in which it seems like the impossible is becoming real, but a very negative impossible. So what is it? What can we mobilize as individuals, as groups, as communities, as societies that opens up new perspectives that lead to a more just, a more fair, a more sustainable, and a more peaceful world? I think these kinds of questions would be fantastic to address more and more in creativity research. And I'm confident that the next decades will bring us to that. So I want to thank you very much. And this is what is now my new email address, but I'm always happy to receive comments and questions. Thank you very much for listening.